positive early access release in 2020, you might be wondering, how much has Grounded grown in the last 2 years? Well, in this video, I'm going to go through a brief overview of what Grounded is and some of its biggest changes. And hopefully by the end, you'll have a better understanding if Grounded is worth playing in 2022. So Grounded is a survival game where you're shrunk down and you must explore, build and survive in a backyard. You can play solo up to 4 people through online co-op. As you explore, you complete missions and you'll slowly start to try and uncover why you were shrunk. However, be warned, it's still in early access, so the story is still being developed. So the game can be summarized as Honey, I Shrunk the Kids RPG game based in the backyard. The major appeal of the game, its unique setting. It really is unlike nearly any other in gaming. When it comes to gameplay, Grounded doesn't reinvent the survival genre. However, it creates a unique and refreshing adaptation. It's a typical survival formula, but has been shrunk down to the backyard. So for example, instead of the typical survival game trees that you cut down to build a house, in Grounded you have grass, and the typical survival game NPCs, like raiders or ghouls, in Grounded are replaced by spiders, ants, stink bugs, and just other insects. So the game does an amazing job of immersing you into this world. As you play, it's constantly surprising and amazing to randomly find everyday objects getting a completely different perspective. So you find a giant half-eaten apple core, or an old cassette that uses RAM to run up something. So aesthetically, the game has always been constantly impressive, and when exploring it, you can't go a couple minutes without seeing an everyday object and having a completely different perspective of it. And this has only gotten better since launch. So since launch, Grounded consistently added multiple new areas, mobs and systems. A significant addition to the game has been the extensive addition of its character customization and skill systems they've added. So the game has added a mutation system. These are skills that you can equip to make your character better at a particular task. So they are earned by completing a particular task or through milestones. So for example, if you're constantly fighting ants, you'll unlock a mutation that helps in fighting ants. So this system allows you to randomly equip mutations, play the way you want to play, and add a new level of character customization. And speaking of character progress, they've completely introduced a traditional RPG character upgrading system through the Milk Molar system. So now in Grounded, you collect these things called Milk Molars around the map, and you use them to upgrade your base stats like health and stamina. So this allows for a more traditional RPG character progression. And also, for returning players, they've added more unlocks and missions through the vendor. So with the new RPG system, they've added an extensive new list of weapons and armors. So with the new location came new enemies. So for example, this included flying mobs like the bees and mosquitoes, water mobs like the tadpole, and land mobs like the roly-poly. So these enemies provided a loot and multiple additions to crafting. So now the game has nearly a dozen armor sets with unique abilities and a bunch of new weapons. So for example, you can create a mosquito needle sword that lets you steal enemy health as you attack, or a gas mask to explore some of the new hazarded areas. So when it comes to character customization, the game has seen a drastic increase in content. And this is not even to mention all the added player crafted housing items like the zip line, the mushroom walls, or even the new pet system that you can give outfits to. And in a recent update, they've actually added server customization, so you can actually change the settings on your server to add a little more freedom on the way you want to play. So like most survival games, Grounded has added multiple new unique biomes to explore with unique mobs, missions, and just overall new setting. So some of these new areas include the fish pond with unique mobs and a giant unkillable koi fish, the sand pit that replicates the typical sand biomes in other games. However, in the typical Grounded fashion, it has multiple everyday objects like a sand castle and has mobs that can actually jump out of the sand. You'll also find the new areas like the weed killer poison haze and the trash pile. And these places require you to wear a mask so you don't get poisoned. They've also added more items and a maze on top of the picnic table. And recently, they've added a barbecue that's fallen over to replicate lava levels that you've seen in other games. So each one of these new locations really highlights what Grounded excels at. It's that unique experience. The game has the ability to take a normal everyday thing, like a trash can, falling over and turn it into a giant toxic mountain for the player to be amazed as they climb and explore. So when it comes to new location, Grounded has really excelled in the last 2 years. It wouldn't be helpful if I didn't highlight a few of the issues I experienced when playing. So since the game is still early access, it still has growing pains. In new areas, you can find yourself stuck or glitched into items. So for example, I fell through the soul item when climbing the trash pile and was unable to get out. Also, you may find random clipping issues when you're running around. However, thankfully the game has a help feature, and honestly, for the hours I played, it rarely ever happened. However, one major issue I experienced quite often was the constant multiplayer issues and dropout. Randomly when playing with friends, I'd be kicked out of the menu and unable to rejoin their world. The host would need to save the game and leave and log back in to reset it. This wasn't a significant issue and it was easily fixed. Also, some players may not like that because the game's constantly getting updated, they warn you that old saves may be a bit unstable. Ultimately, if you didn't enjoy the game's original aesthetic, it may not be for you. However, if you played Grounded before and enjoyed the unique perspective, I would highly recommend giving the game a go again, especially if you want to play a co-op game with friends. I would also highly recommend the game to fans of open world survival games who just want a unique experience and a change of pace.